The story begins with a silence so heavy you could cut it with a knife. A silence that doesn't belong to an ordinary home, but to a royal exile in Montecito where walls echo with whispers of broken trust. Behind those walls sits Meghan Markle, her hands trembling as she drafts yet another message to Prince Harry, pleading, begging him to reconsider a move that could end not just their marriage, but her reputation, her financial security, and the very image she has tried to build for years. The move? A $100 million divorce lawsuit. What would drive a man once celebrated as the carefree, loyal prince into such a cold and calculated decision? What would push him to demand not just separation, not just freedom, but financial retribution of staggering proportions? For Meghan, the number itself carries more than monetary weight. It symbolizes public humiliation. It means headlines branding her as the woman who lost everything. It means watching Hollywood's already fragile acceptance of her crumble overnight. And for Harry, it means making a statement. That betrayal, whether emotional, financial, or personal, has consequences. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But let's not race to the end. This story is not about a simple financial claim filed in a courtroom. It's about the raw emotions bubbling beneath it. The nights Meghan has reportedly broken down in tears, the moments Harry has sat in silence staring into the distance, and the way the world has watched their every move like hawks, dissecting their smiles and silences alike. To understand why Meghan is begging Harry to stop, we have to pull back the curtain and walk into the messy, fragile, unpredictable heart of their story. This isn't just a tale of love gone wrong. It's a collision of two worlds, one raised in duty and one in ambition. It's a struggle between promises made in private and expectations broadcast in public. And now, with divorce papers and a $100 million figure looming over them, the stakes couldn't be higher. The beginning of this drama can be traced to a simple truth. The life Meghan thought she was walking into and the reality she encountered were never the same. At first, Harry was her knight, her rescuer from the cruel press, her escape from a world that judged and mocked her. For him, she was the flame that reignited his sense of rebellion and purpose, someone who understood his pain and stood with him against the monarchy he both loved and resented. But as years passed, the fairy tale sheen wore off. The very walls that once protected them now felt like barriers. And behind closed doors, whispers turned to arguments. Arguments turned to shouting, and shouting turned into the bitter quiet that marks a marriage on the brink. By the time the lawsuit entered the picture, Meghan was no longer simply Meghan, the Duchess-turned-Hollywood dreamer. She was a woman whose image had been dented by failed projects, canceled contracts, and whispers of overreach. To have Harry, her partner, her anchor, stand across from her in a courtroom demanding $100 million wasn't just betrayal, it was devastation. Which is why her pleas have been described as desperate. Sources close to the couple suggest she's begged him late at night, even sending long, emotional notes where she promises change, vows loyalty, and reminds him of their children. Harry's silence in response to these pleas, however, tells its own story. For Harry, the lawsuit isn't just about money. It's about drawing a line in the sand. Years of compromise, of feeling overshadowed, of watching promises break, have hardened into resolve. And perhaps, in his eyes, $100 million is less about dollars and cents and more about the price of betrayal. This introduction, though, isn't meant to give away the ending. That's not how this kind of story works. Instead, think of it as standing at the edge of a cliff. You can see the storm rolling in, the waves crashing violently below, and the figure standing on the precipice deciding whether to leap or turn back. That figure is Meghan, clutching at the only lifeline she thinks might save her, Harry's compassion. But the question that hangs over us is chilling. Does Harry have any left for her? The world has seen high-profile divorces before. Hollywood is littered with the wreckage of love gone wrong. But this isn't Brad and Angelina or Charles and Diana replayed. This is bigger. This is global fascination, royal bloodlines, financial empires, and reputations that have been fought for, mocked, and dissected in every newspaper and on every talk show stage. The $100 million lawsuit makes it more than personal. It makes it symbolic. It's about power, survival, and legacy. And so, As we step into this story, remember this. Every plea Meghan makes is not just about stopping a lawsuit. It's about stopping the unraveling of everything she has built. Every refusal Harry delivers is not just about money. It's about reclaiming a part of himself he feels he lost. The storm is here, and whether you side with Meghan, sympathize with Harry, or simply watch in stunned fascination, one truth is certain. The ending of this story will leave no one untouched. What happens when a love story once sold as a fairy tale becomes a cautionary tale? What happens when the world's most famous couple becomes its most infamous battlefield? These are the questions that drive this story, and by the end, we'll arrive at answers that are as shocking as they are heartbreaking. But for now, hold your breath. The curtain is just lifting, and the first act has only begun. Every love story has a beginning, a rise, and if it falters, a moment where it can no longer hold its weight. For Harry and Meghan, that breaking point didn't come in one loud explosion. It didn't come from one public scandal or even a single betrayal that could easily be pointed to. It arrived slowly, quietly, weaving itself into the fabric of their lives until one day, the walls they had built around themselves could no longer carry the strain. The breaking point was a culmination of unspoken words, mounting pressures, and disappointments that both tried to ignore until it could no longer be silenced. To understand the gravity of the lawsuit that would eventually follow, we must rewind to the beginning of these fractures. In the early years of their relationship, Harry and Meghan were united against a common enemy: the press, the monarchy, and the doubters who said it would never last. That unity became their armor. But unity forged in defiance can be fragile. The world they tried to build in Montecito after stepping back from royal duties was not the paradise it was meant to be. Behind the glamour of multi-million-dollar mansions and Hollywood handshakes, there were cracks too fine to see at first, but deepening over time. The breaking point started as whispers in their home, conversations that shifted from shared dreams to lists of complaints. Harry, once captivated by Meghan's ambition and drive, began to feel that his wife's hunger for relevance in Hollywood came at a cost. Meghan, who had walked away from her career and endured endless criticism, felt unsupported when doors closed and deals evaporated. What once felt like an adventure together now felt like blame exchanged across the dinner table. Money became a sore subject. Deals worth millions were signed with fanfare, but often ended in disappointment. The Spotify project was pulled, Netflix projects were reportedly underwhelming, and whispers of overspending and financial instability began to circle. Harry, who had given up the safety of royal funding, started to question whether his leap of faith had been misplaced. For Meghan, who had hoped to prove herself as more than a duchess, every failure became an unbearable weight on her shoulders. When these pressures collided with their private disagreements, the result was inevitable: resentment. But resentment doesn't arrive like a storm. It arrives like a drizzle. One argument about finances becomes another about trust. One accusation of neglect becomes another about ambition. And soon, both found themselves on opposite ends of the same room. Their conversations replaced by silences that said more than words ever could. The breaking point, for Harry, was a growing sense that his marriage was built on illusions, dreams sold to him, promises never kept. For Meghan, the breaking point was watching the man who once defended her unconditionally now question her motives and choices. When friends close to Harry began to notice his absence at Hollywood gatherings and Meghan's absence at his private family visits, rumors began to swirl. Those closest to the couple whispered that Harry felt betrayed, not by one act, but by a pattern. Meghan's constant push to remain relevant in Hollywood clashed with Harry's desire for a quieter life of purpose. It was no longer about building something together. It was about survival on different paths. One night, according to those who claim to have been privy to their inner circle, Harry reached his limit. The conversation wasn't loud, but it was final. He told Meghan that he could no longer carry the weight of what their marriage had become. He spoke of betrayal, not in the way tabloids might imagine, but in the way only a partner can feel. Betrayal of trust, betrayal of love, betrayal of promises. Meghan reportedly begged, insisting they could work through it, but Harry's words carried a new edge. For the first time, he wasn't talking about fixing things. He was talking about ending them. That was the moment the lawsuit became a possibility. At first, divorce was enough. A clean break, The end of a chapter. But as Harry began to examine the financial entanglements they had built together, the properties, the business deals, the brand, they no longer seemed like neutral assets. To him, they were evidence of exploitation, of promises that had drained him emotionally and financially. The number, $100 million, didn't emerge out of thin air. It was a calculation of years of what he felt he had lost, both in wealth and in peace of mind. For Meghan, that breaking point was like watching her world collapse in slow motion. A husband once loyal to a fault was now her accuser. A man who once walked away from his family for her was now preparing to walk away from her with demands that could shatter her. The realization cut deeper than the lawsuit itself. The love story that had been broadcast as a fairy tale to millions was now nothing more than a legal battle waiting to explode. But the breaking point wasn't just theirs to feel. It reverberated through their families, their friends, and the world that had invested in their love story. For the royal family, it was another scandal threatening the monarchy's image. For Hollywood, it was the confirmation that Meghan's story wasn't the reinvention she had promised. For the public, it was a reminder that no matter how glamorous or powerful a couple may seem, the struggles of love, betrayal, and survival are universal. This chapter is not about courtrooms or contracts. It's about that invisible line in a marriage where love becomes duty and duty becomes resentment. It's about the moment when two people realize they are no longer partners but opponents, and every word spoken feels like a weapon. That moment, the breaking point, is where the $100 million lawsuit found its roots. And as Meghan sits now, pleading for Harry to reconsider, her voice cracking under the weight of desperation, the echoes of that breaking point still ring in their ears. For Harry, it was the moment he stopped seeing Meghan as the woman who saved him and started seeing her as the woman who betrayed him. For Meghan, it was the moment she realized that the love story she fought so hard to defend was crumbling faster than she could stop it. The breaking point was not a single night, not a single fight, but the sum of every silence, every disappointment, and every betrayal, real or imagined, that built the walls now separating them. And those walls, higher than ever, are where the lawsuit begins its climb toward devastation. The plea did not come with cameras rolling or polished statements crafted by publicists. It came in hushed tones, late at night, when Meghan Markle was stripped of her armor, her voice trembling as she tried to hold together the last fragile pieces of her marriage. For all the power she once wielded in commanding interviews and negotiating contracts, for all the confidence that carried her from Hollywood to the halls of Buckingham Palace, Meghan now found herself in an unfamiliar role, the one begging for mercy. Reports suggest that her appeals to Harry began quietly, with private conversations meant to dissuade him from escalating their separation into an explosive courtroom battle. She reminded him of the years they had shared, the risks he had taken for her, the children they were raising together. She painted pictures of Archie and Lilibet asking about their parents, wondering why their father would publicly brand their mother as an adversary. For Meghan, the lawsuit was not just a financial nightmare. It was an existential threat to her identity, her public image, and the fragile stability she had left. She is said to have written Harry long, emotional letters, not the carefully composed kind sent to journalists or friends, but the raw, unpolished kind filled with confessions and pleas. In them, she asked Harry to remember who she was when he first fell in love with her, the woman who listened to his fears, who supported him when he felt caged by the monarchy. She asked him to remember Diana, his mother, and what she would think if her son dragged his wife into a courtroom to demand $100 million. These letters, according to those familiar with their contents, carried not just sorrow but fear, the fear that this lawsuit could strip her of everything she had built. Harry, however, was unmoved. For Meghan, that coldness was devastating. It was not the Harry who once defended her against relentless media scrutiny, who spoke about protecting her at all costs, who chose exile for her sake. It was a different Harry, hardened, determined, unwilling to bend. That unyielding stance drove her pleas into desperation. Sources claim Meghan cried during some of these appeals, breaking down in front of him as she begged him to think of the children, to think of what they had sacrificed to be together. But why was Meghan so afraid of this lawsuit beyond the obvious financial implications? The answer lies in the truths that court proceedings might uncover. Discovery, the legal process by which documents, communications, and evidence are revealed, posed a danger that Meghan could not ignore. Whispers of surrogacy, private financial deals, and hidden arrangements could become public knowledge. Even if unfounded, the exposure itself would be catastrophic for her image. Meghan's plea, then, was not only about stopping Harry from demanding money. It was about stopping Harry from tearing down the curtain, shielding their private life from the world. To add to her despair, Meghan found herself increasingly isolated. The powerful friends who once stood by her seemed to vanish as the scandal grew. Oprah remained silent. Serena Williams was distant. Tyler Perry, who had once offered his home as a safe haven, declined to publicly defend her now. Hollywood, a world Meghan desperately wanted to be embraced by, had grown cold. In this isolation, Meghan's pleas to Harry became her last hope. If she could not stop him, no one could. One plea, in particular, stands out in accounts shared by those close to the couple. Meghan is said to have knelt before Harry, her voice cracking as she whispered, "Please don't do this to us. Don't destroy everything we've built. Don't destroy me." In that moment, she wasn't the Duchess, the activist, or the Hollywood personality. She was a wife trying to hold on to a husband who had already turned away. Harry's response, though calm, was chilling. He reportedly told her, "This isn't about us anymore. This is about the truth. This is about what I've lost." For Meghan, those words cut deeper than any lawsuit could. They meant that Harry's decision was final, that his pain had reached a point where her pleas were nothing but noise against the roar of his determination. Her desperation escalated into strategic maneuvers. Meghan attempted to rally what remained of her influence. She reached out to advisors, friends and media, and even her estranged family members, searching for someone who might intervene. She floated stories to sympathetic outlets about her being blindsided, about Harry's coldness, about the cruelty of dragging a mother into court. But these moves, far from helping, only deepened Harry's resolve. To him, they were more proof that Meghan's focus was image, not love. Her plea also extended to financial negotiation. Meghan suggested private settlements, agreements that would avoid public spectacle. She reportedly offered to relinquish certain properties, to compromise on business ventures, even to adjust custody arrangements, anything to stop the words $100 million from being splashed across court documents and tabloid covers. Yet Harry's silence, or worse, his refusal, told her everything she feared. He wanted more than money. He wanted vindication. For Meghan, the plea was as much about survival as it was about love. Without Harry's forgiveness, she faced not only financial ruin, but public humiliation. She understood what such a lawsuit would mean in Hollywood circles, that she was no longer a partner but a liability, no longer a rising star but a fading one. For Harry, her pleas may have sounded like manipulation. For Meghan, they were the last remnants of hope she had left. The emotional weight of Meghan's plea cannot be overstated. Imagine a woman who once walked into Windsor Castle as a new duchess, smiling beside her prince, now kneeling in her own home begging that same prince not to destroy her. Imagine the shift in power, the collapse of pride, the quiet acknowledgement that all her strength and influence meant nothing in the face of one man's determination. That image alone is enough to understand the desperation behind her plea. And yet, for all her tears and promises, the lawsuit remains. Harry, once swayed by emotion, now steels himself against it. Meghan's plea echoes in the silence between them, unanswered, hanging heavy in the air. And the world, watching from afar, asks the same question Meghan does. Will Harry relent, or will he carry this fight into the courtroom no matter the cost? The plea is more than a moment in their private battle. It is the soul of this story. It is the point where love meets fear, where promises meet betrayal, where pride collapses into desperation. Meghan's plea may not stop the lawsuit, but it reveals the depth of what is at stake. And as her words linger in Harry's ears, one truth becomes undeniable. The outcome of this battle will change not just their marriage, but the way the world sees them forever. The number $100 million carries a weight that goes far beyond the paper it's printed on. It is a sum that immediately sparks images of sprawling estates, fleets of luxury cars, international travel, and influence that stretches across continents. But in the case of Harry and Meghan, that figure does not simply represent wealth. It represents the value of betrayal as Harry sees it, the cost of broken promises, and the staggering fallout of a love story that once promised liberation but instead descended into bitterness and financial warfare. To understand the lawsuit and why the number has become so pivotal, we have to break down the empire that Harry and Meghan attempted to build after stepping away from royal life. When they left Buckingham Palace behind in 2020, their vision was grand. They would become financially independent, free from the royal purse strings, and would transform their global popularity into a lucrative brand. At first, the deals came quickly and impressively. A Netflix partnership valued at around $100 million, a Spotify deal reportedly worth tens of millions, and speaking engagements that commanded six-figure fees. The couple presented themselves as modern royals who would inspire and uplift while building a financial empire that would rival Hollywood's most powerful names. But as time went on, cracks began to show in those very foundations. The Spotify deal was quietly dropped after lackluster performance. Netflix executives began to express dissatisfaction with the return on their investment, with whispers that projects lacked depth or originality. Meghan's children's show was scrapped before it saw the light of day, while Harry's documentary projects failed to gain the cultural traction they hoped for. What was once touted as a golden era of success began to look like a series of disappointments. And then there was the spending. The Montecito mansion, with its manicured gardens and grand halls, became a symbol of both their newfound freedom and their extravagance. Private jets, security costs, designer wardrobes, and the maintenance of a lifestyle fit for royalty but unsupported by steady royal income meant that their millions drained quickly. Harry, who had once enjoyed the cushion of royal wealth, was now acutely aware of every financial misstep. Meghan, who saw these expenditures as necessary to uphold their image in Hollywood, pushed for more connections, more appearances, more investments. This is where the lawsuit finds its grounding. To Harry, the money at stake is not merely about ensuring his own financial stability after divorce. It is about accountability for what he perceives as exploitation. His name, his title, his legacy turned into a brand that enriched Meghan more than it fulfilled their shared dreams. The $100 million is, in his view, the cost of those years of disillusionment, the price of being pulled into ventures that left him more exposed and vulnerable than ever before. For Meghan, however, the money carries an entirely different meaning. It is not about the numbers in a bank account. It is about survival in Hollywood, where perception is everything. A lawsuit demanding $100 million paints her not as a victim of failed contracts, but as the cause of them. It cements her in the public eye as the woman who lost not just her marriage, but also the financial war that followed. For someone who has fought tirelessly to craft an image of success, independence, and power, that kind of blow would be catastrophic. The media frenzy around the figure only intensifies the tension. Headlines scream about the staggering sum. Talk shows debate whether Harry is justified, and analysts pick apart their finances, speculating on what assets might be sold, seized, or divided. Every public discussion chips away at Meghan's plea for privacy and reinforces Harry's determination to move forward. The money, once meant to represent freedom, now represents chains neither can escape. Consider the irony. When Harry and Meghan left the royal family, they declared financial independence as their shield against criticism. They no longer wanted to rely on the monarchy for income, to be accused of draining public funds. But in pursuing independence, they entered a new world of corporate contracts and celebrity branding, one far less forgiving than the crown. In that world, failure is not softened by tradition. It is exposed, dissected, and remembered. And in that world, $100 million becomes both a symbol of what they gained and a reminder of what they lost. The money at stake also reflects deeper questions about fairness. From Harry's perspective, he gave up everything, his military ties, his royal duties, his family bonds, to support Meghan and the vision she presented. In return, he feels that his sacrifice has left him with little but ridicule and a tarnished reputation. The lawsuit, then, is not just about recouping losses. It is about placing a monetary value on his pain, his sacrifices, and his disillusionment. For Meghan, the demand feels like a punishment, a way of silencing her and diminishing her autonomy. But beneath these personal grievances lies a more universal truth about money in relationships. Love can blur lines, especially when intertwined with fame and power. What begins as shared dreams of building a life together can quickly unravel into questions of who contributed what, who owes whom, and how much each sacrifice is worth. In Meghan's case, the lawsuit transforms her from partner to debtor, from wife to defendant. In Harry's case, it transforms him from husband to claimant, from lover to adversary. The $100 million isn't just a figure, it's a battlefield. It drags their children into the equation, as custody arrangements often intertwine with financial settlements. It drags their reputations into court, where every asset, every deal, every contract may be scrutinized. And it drags their love story into the public square, where every whisper of betrayal and every suspicion of exploitation will be laid bare. For Meghan, the stakes could not be higher. Without Harry's forgiveness, the lawsuit represents more than financial ruin. It represents the shattering of her carefully constructed identity. For Harry, refusing Meghan's pleas means proving a point. That betrayal has a cost, and that cost is $100 million. And so, as we stand at this point in their story, the money is no longer just about financial independence or celebrity contracts. It is about power, survival, and vindication. It is about whether Harry will enforce the price of betrayal and whether Meghan can withstand the cost. The $100 million at stake is not just a number. It is the weight of a love story collapsing under the burden of broken trust. When Prince Harry made the decision to launch a $100 million divorce lawsuit against Meghan, it wasn't an impulse. It wasn't a fit of rage or a rash move made in the heat of argument. It was, by all accounts, the result of months, perhaps even years, of deep reflection, private torment, and growing determination. To understand Harry's resolve is to understand the transformation of a man who once defined himself by loyalty, by protection, by unconditional love, into someone hardened, cautious, and unrelenting. Harry has always been defined by emotion. Unlike his brother William, who has been trained since birth to maintain composure, Harry has worn his heart on his sleeve. From the grief he displayed after losing his mother to the missteps of his youth splashed across tabloids, Harry has always lived under scrutiny. But that same openness also meant that when he loved without restraint. With Meghan, the world saw him commit to her with a fierceness rarely seen in modern royals. He defended her against the press, stood by her when critics called her unfit for royal life, and ultimately walked away from his family and country to build a life with her. For a man who risked everything, the unraveling of that trust did not happen overnight. His resolve to sue Meghan came after watching what he perceived as a pattern: failed projects where he felt sidelined, public narratives where his voice was overshadowed, and choices that left him feeling like a pawn in Meghan's quest for fame rather than an equal partner. The lawsuits against the press, the endless public battles, the controversies that followed them into every new venture. These were not just challenges, but constant reminders to Harry that his life had become defined by conflict rather than peace. Friends close to Harry have spoken about his quiet frustration in recent years. He is said to have confided that he felt drained, used, even manipulated. For a man who longed for simplicity, for the quiet life he never had as a royal, Meghan's relentless pursuit of recognition in Hollywood seemed like a betrayal of the very dream they had built together. This perception hardened into conviction over time. Each public failure, the Spotify fallout, the Netflix struggles, the public criticism, reinforced Harry's belief that their partnership was no longer one of equals, but one where he carried the burden while Meghan chased spotlight after spotlight. So when Meghan pleaded with him to drop the lawsuit, Harry's resolve was already immovable. His determination had reached a point where emotion could no longer sway him. He listened, he acknowledged her tears, but inside, he had drawn a line. The lawsuit was not just about money. It was about reclaiming his dignity. It was about showing her, and perhaps the world, that he would no longer be manipulated or silenced. Harry's resolve was also shaped by a deep sense of betrayal. While tabloids speculate about what may have broken the final strands of their marriage, insiders suggest that Harry felt misled about key aspects of their life together. Financial decisions made without his consent, strategies pursued in his name, but not for his benefit, and moments where he felt excluded from choices that affected his future left him feeling diminished. That sense of being sidelined, of being reduced to a supporting character in Meghan's narrative, gnawed at him. By filing the lawsuit, Harry was, in essence, saying, "I will not be erased. I will not be diminished. I will not be silent." This resolve extended to his role as a father. Harry has often spoken about how his children are his guiding light, the reason he wants a better world. Yet, in the chaos of their marriage unraveling, he began to fear what their future would look like. Could he trust Meghan to safeguard them when so much of their life was entangled in image and performance? Could he ensure stability if she controlled the financial narrative? These questions strengthened his determination to create a legal framework that would protect both him and his children, even if it meant tearing through the fragile remnants of his marriage. Those who know Harry describe his resolve as quiet but unshakable. He is not one to shout from rooftops or parade his anger before cameras. Instead, his strength comes from a steady, almost stubborn persistence. Once his mind is made up, it is nearly impossible to move him. This is the same man who walked behind his mother's coffin at 12 years old, enduring the gaze of millions. The same man who went to war zones to carve his own path. The same man who chose exile over conformity when he married Meghan. That same steel now fuels his lawsuit. What makes Harry's resolve all the more striking is how it contrasts with Meghan's pleas, where she has turned to emotion, to persuasion, to appeals of love and memory. Harry has turned to principle. He has reduced the matter to truth and consequence. To him, the lawsuit is not an attack, but a reckoning. It is his way of finally asserting control in a relationship where he felt it slipping away. Critics will ask if this resolve is fueled by anger, by spite, by a desire to punish Meghan. But those close to him argue otherwise. They say it is not about vengeance, but about clarity. Harry, they claim, has reached a point where he no longer wants to be swayed by charm, appearances, or promises. His resolve is about protecting himself, protecting his legacy, and ensuring that the years he gave to Meghan are not written off as wasted. Still, one cannot ignore the humanity in his decision. Lawsuits may be about figures and legal arguments, but beneath them lie human emotions. For Harry, pursuing a $100 million claim is not just about the balance sheet. It is about expressing the depth of his pain, his sense of loss, and his need for validation. Every refusal to Meghan's pleas is another way of telling her, "You cannot undo what has been done. You cannot erase what I have felt." This resolve, however, comes at a cost. It isolates him further from Meghan, from Hollywood, even from elements of his family. It paints him as ruthless in the eyes of some, heroic in the eyes of others. It transforms the narrative from a marital dispute into a global spectacle, one where every move will be dissected, every word scrutinized. But Harry has chosen that path knowingly. His resolve is not blind, it is deliberate. The question now is how far that resolve will carry him. Will he see the lawsuit through to the end, no matter the toll it takes on his family, his reputation, or his children? Or will Meghan find some way to pierce the armor he has built around himself, to remind him of the man he once was, the man who believed in their love above all else? For now, the answer seems clear. Harry's resolve is unyielding, and Meghan's pleas have only strengthened it. The breaking point may have ended their marriage, but Harry's resolve defines what comes next. He has made his decision, and as the lawsuit looms larger, the world watches to see whether that resolve will lead to justice, devastation, or both. For Meghan Markle, the fight against Harry's $100 million divorce lawsuit is not confined to courtrooms and legal documents. It is also being waged on the battlefield she knows best, the court of public opinion. Meghan has long understood that image, perception, and narrative are as powerful as facts themselves. She built her career in Hollywood by mastering appearances, by knowing how to walk into a room and command attention, how to align herself with causes and conversations that kept her relevant. But now, as Harry refuses to yield, she finds herself fighting a war she may not be able to win, protecting her reputation while the world watches it unravel. At first, Meghan leaned on her familiar strategies. She attempted to control the narrative through her trusted allies in the media. Carefully placed stories appeared in sympathetic outlets, portraying her as blindsided by Harry's lawsuit, emphasizing her role as a mother, and framing Harry as harsh and unyielding. These stories tried to recast Meghan as the victim, a woman desperately trying to save her family, while her husband publicly humiliated her with demands that seemed excessive and vindictive. It was the same formula she had used successfully in the past. Lean on emotional appeal, remind the world of the injustices she had endured, and paint herself as the one under siege. But the problem this time was different. Hollywood was no longer listening with the same sympathy it once had. Executives who had once lined up to work with her were now cautious, even distant. The fallout from the canceled Spotify deal had bruised her reputation as a reliable creator. The Netflix contract, while still active, had not produced the blockbuster content promised. Her podcast, once hailed as groundbreaking, was quietly dismissed by critics as lackluster. Each disappointment chipped away at her credibility. And now, with a lawsuit dragging her name into yet another controversy, Meghan's reputation was no longer that of a rising star. It was of someone constantly surrounded by chaos. Meghan tried to reassert control through appearances and speeches, but even these were met with skepticism. Every polished interview, every public appearance was dissected for hidden meanings. Was her smile genuine? Was her message authentic? Was she speaking as a humanitarian or as a woman fighting for her survival? The public, once captivated by her story of resilience against the monarchy, was growing weary of what seemed like an endless cycle of drama. Her attempts to win sympathy through family narratives also faltered. While she emphasized her devotion to Archie and Lilibet, critics pointed out that she often used the children as shields in moments of crisis, invoking them whenever her image was threatened. Harry's supporters countered her claims by suggesting that the lawsuit was precisely about protecting the children's future from instability. In this clash of narratives, Meghan's strategy lost the clarity it once had. Perhaps the most damaging aspect of Meghan's reputation war was the silence of her allies. Oprah, who had once hosted the explosive interview that shook the royal family, remained publicly quiet. Serena Williams, her close friend, offered no public words of support. Tyler Perry, who had once been a vocal protector, avoided involvement. Even the celebrity circles Meghan had worked so hard to cultivate seemed to shrink away from the scandal. In Hollywood, association matters, and aligning with Meghan now carried risks that few were willing to take. The British press, ever hostile, seized the opportunity. Tabloids splashed headlines about the lawsuit daily, painting Meghan as desperate, manipulative, and failing. Old criticisms resurfaced, accusations of ambition, control, and betrayal. Even in the United States, where she had once been welcomed warmly, skepticism grew. The idea of a duchess-turned-celebrity suing and being sued by her own prince husband made for irresistible headlines, but not flattering ones. Meghan found herself caught in a storm she could not spin. And so, her reputation war took on a more desperate edge. She began reaching out to producers, directors, and even political figures, hoping to secure new platforms to rehabilitate her image. But the responses were tepid. No one wanted to invest in a brand so volatile, in a figure whose name guaranteed attention but also division. The very ambition that once drew Harry to her now isolated her, making her seem less like a victim and more like a strategist whose calculations had gone wrong. Still, Meghan is not one to surrender easily. Those who know her say she has always thrived in adversity, using setbacks as fuel. Her speeches began to shift, subtly weaving in references to betrayal, resilience, and survival. She framed herself as a woman fighting not just a lawsuit, but a global system that sought to silence her. To some, this framing resonated. It reminded them of the Meghan who had once stood bravely against the monarchy. But to others, it seemed like another attempt to deflect responsibility, to turn a personal failing into a political cause. What made the reputation war even more precarious was timing. The lawsuit came at a moment when Meghan needed credibility the most. She was still trying to establish herself as a Hollywood producer, an influencer, and a humanitarian. She had plans for new projects, partnerships, and campaigns. But with her name tied to a $100 million lawsuit, every door seemed harder to open. Investors hesitated, networks stalled, and audiences rolled their eyes at yet another headline. Reputation, once lost, is nearly impossible to reclaim. Meghan's war to protect hers has become less about winning and more about surviving, minimizing the damage, controlling what she can, and holding onto the fragments of influence that remain. But reputation is also about perception, and perception shifts quickly. Every plea to Harry, every article written about her desperation, every silence from her once loyal allies adds to the narrative that Meghan is losing not only her marriage, but also her standing in the world she worked so hard to enter. Harry's resolve has hardened, but Meghan's war is ongoing. She knows that if she loses both the lawsuit and her reputation, there may be no comeback. And so she fights, with words, with appearances, with every ounce of charm and strategy she can muster. But the question remains, is she fighting to protect her children and her legacy, or simply to protect the image she has spent years curating? The reputation war Meghan now faces is perhaps the greatest challenge of her life. It is not just about convincing Harry to relent. It is about convincing the world that she is not the villain in this story. Whether she succeeds or not will depend not only on her strategies, but also on how much more the public is willing to believe. From the moment the first whispers of Harry's $100 million divorce lawsuit against Meghan Markle began to circulate, the royal family found themselves once again thrust into the center of a storm they neither asked for nor welcomed. For King Charles, Prince William, Princess Anne, and even Queen Camilla, the situation was both a vindication of their long-held doubts and a potential catastrophe that threatened the already fragile reputation of the monarchy. To understand the dynamics at play, one must picture the halls of Buckingham Palace where silence often masks chaos, and where private conversations behind gilded doors can carry the weight of centuries of tradition. The family has always known that Harry and Meghan's departure from royal duties was not the end of the drama, but merely the beginning of a new chapter. When they sat across from Oprah in that infamous interview, accusing the family of cruelty, racism, and betrayal, the monarchy endured one of its most humiliating blows in decades. In the years that followed, the Sussexes became both outsiders and threats, their every move scrutinized not only by the press, but by the courtiers tasked with preserving the institution's stability. Now, as Harry turns on Meghan with the fury of a man betrayed, the royals find themselves in an unusual position, silent spectators to a war they had once tried to prevent. King Charles, ever the cautious monarch, is said to have reacted with a mixture of sorrow and calculation. On one hand, this was his son, a boy he had cradled and guided through unimaginable grief after the death of Diana. On the other, this was a scandal that risked pulling the monarchy into yet another firestorm of controversy. His advisors counseled discretion, no public statements, no official acknowledgement, only silence. The palace's golden rule, never complain, never explain, became more vital than ever. And yet, in private, Charles reportedly felt conflicted. Was this lawsuit a sign of Harry finally seeing through Meghan, or was it another reckless move that would tarnish the family name further? For Prince William, the lawsuit carried a different weight. His relationship with Harry had already collapsed in the wake of Megxit and the subsequent accusations hurled in interviews and Harry's memoir. William had been painted as cold, as unsupportive, as the heir who failed to protect his younger brother. Now, watching Harry publicly turn against Meghan, William saw what he had long suspected, that Meghan's presence had destabilized not only the monarchy, but Harry himself. For William, this was less about sympathy and more about vindication. He had warned Harry, argued with him, even pleaded with him to reconsider the whirlwind of his marriage. Now, with the lawsuit looming, William could quietly say to himself that he had been right all along. Yet, even vindication comes with risks. William knew the monarchy could not be seen as gloating over Meghan's downfall or Harry's bitterness. Any appearance of satisfaction would only feed the narrative that the royals had conspired against Meghan from the start. So William, like his father, remained silent in public, maintaining the image of duty while privately grappling with the satisfaction of being proven correct. His focus, as ever, remained on protecting his wife Catherine and their children from the media circus that seemed to follow Harry and Meghan wherever they went. Princess Anne, known for her bluntness and no-nonsense attitude, was reportedly less conflicted. To her, Meghan had always been a disruption, someone who entered the royal family without respect for its traditions, rules, or obligations, and who had given her life to service without complaint, saw Meghan's ambitions as self-serving and dangerous. In private conversations, she is believed to have been forthright. This was Meghan's mess, and Harry had chosen it. Now, if Harry wanted to extract himself through legal means, that was his business, not the monarchy's. Anne's pragmatism cut through the emotional weight of the matter. She cared less about the drama and more about ensuring that the institution remained untouched by the spectacle. Queen Camilla, on the other hand, approached the matter with a different perspective. Having lived through decades of public vilification herself, she understood more than most the importance of perception. Camilla recognized that Meghan's reputation mirrored, in some ways, her own struggles against public scorn. But unlike Meghan, Camilla had endured in silence, slowly rehabilitating her image over time. Watching Meghan flail publicly, Camilla likely saw both a cautionary tale and a reassurance that resilience and patience, not constant confrontation, were the tools for survival. Still, she also knew that the lawsuit risked dredging up Diana's memory once again, reopening wounds the monarchy had worked hard to heal. For the courtiers and advisors surrounding the royal family, the lawsuit was both a headache and a relief. On the one hand, it guaranteed renewed media scrutiny, headlines linking the monarchy to chaos even when they were not directly involved. On the other hand, it shifted the narrative away from Buckingham Palace and placed the spotlight firmly on Harry and Meghan's dysfunction. For once, the royals were not the villains in the story, they were bystanders. And in the strange world of royal optics, being a bystander was far safer than being a participant. Publicly, the family maintained their silence. There were no comments, no statements, no acknowledgments. But behind closed doors, the lawsuit was a frequent topic of conversation. Would Harry's revelations in court inadvertently drag the family into the mud again? Would Meghan retaliate with accusations that implicated them? Or would the couple's implosion finally put an end to years of turmoil that had plagued the monarchy? These were the questions whispered in corridors and debated in private meetings. What made the situation particularly delicate was the global fascination with Harry and Meghan's story. While the British press delighted in Meghan's missteps, international audiences still carried sympathies shaped by the Oprah interview and years of coverage portraying her as the outsider bullied by the royal machine. The lawsuit risked complicating this narrative. If Meghan was now the one being sued by Harry, the victim and villain roles became blurred. For the monarchy, this was both dangerous and useful. Dangerous because any shift in sympathy could once again turn public anger toward them, but useful because the spotlight shifted away from their own controversies. The royal family, then, watched and waited. They knew that every word they spoke, every gesture they made, could be interpreted as taking sides. And so they chose silence, letting Harry and Meghan's war play out without interference. But silence does not mean indifference. In their private reflections, each royal saw the lawsuit as confirmation of their long-held beliefs. For Charles, the dangers of personal impulses overshadowing duty. For William, the validation of his warnings. For Anne, the folly of ignoring tradition. For Camilla, the peril of trying to fight public opinion head-on. As Meghan pleaded for Harry to drop the lawsuit, as headlines screamed about the staggering sum at stake, the royals sat in their palaces, sipping tea, attending engagements, smiling before cameras, all while quietly absorbing the fallout of the very storm they had predicted years earlier. The royal family watches, but it does not intervene. And in that silence, they preserve their most powerful weapon, endurance. Amid the drama of lawsuits, betrayals, and reputations, there lies a quieter but far more devastating battlefield, the lives of Archie and Lilibet. Children too young to understand the chaos unfolding around them, yet old enough in time to feel the weight of every decision their parents make today. While Harry and Meghan wage war against each other, their children have become unwilling symbols of the conflict, used as arguments, shields, and bargaining chips in a struggle that threatens to shape the rest of their lives. From the beginning, Archie and Lilibet were at the center of Harry and Meghan's narrative. They were framed as the reason the couple stepped away from royal life, the reason privacy was demanded, and the reason new ventures were pursued. Harry often spoke about wanting his children to have a normal childhood, free from the scrutiny that had haunted him. Meghan, too, presented herself as fiercely protective, determined to shield her son and daughter from the cruelty of both the press and the monarchy. Yet, as the lawsuit unfolds, the very shield they once raised has begun to look more like a sword. Custody becomes the unspoken word in every conversation. Behind the legal jargon of financial settlements and the public spectacle of press coverage lies the looming question: who will raise Archie and Lilibet if this lawsuit ends in divorce? For Harry, the idea of losing time with his children, of being separated from them, is unbearable. He has always been haunted by the loss of his own mother, by the emptiness of growing up under the strict care of the monarchy without her presence. The thought of his children growing up without his influence, or worse, with him painted as the villain in Meghan's narrative, fuels his determination to press forward. For Meghan, the children represent her strongest argument against the lawsuit. In her pleas to Harry, she invoked their names constantly. She reminded him of bedtime stories, of first steps and first words, of the bond they once shared as a family. She framed the lawsuit not as a financial move, but as a betrayal of the children's future. How could Harry demand $100 million, she asked, when that money could instead secure their education, their home, their sense of stability? Every tear she shed in private, every carefully placed story in the press, returned to the same refrain: think of the children. But the tragedy of this narrative is that the children, though invoked endlessly, have no voice. Their names are used to justify decisions, to sway opinions, to win sympathy. In the court of public opinion, they are no longer simply Harry and Meghan's son and daughter. They are pawns in a larger game. Each parent, consciously or not, projects onto them their own fears and desires. For Harry, Archie and Lilibet symbolize redemption, the chance to give his children what he never had. For Meghan, they symbolize continuity, proof that she is not only a wife but a mother who deserves compassion. The lawsuit complicates this further. Financial settlements and divorce cases inevitably intersect with custody battles. Every figure on the balance sheet raises questions about child support, housing, and inheritance. For Meghan, losing the lawsuit could mean not only financial devastation but a weakening of her claim as the stable parent. For Harry, winning the lawsuit could strengthen his position but at the risk of being accused of destroying the very stability he claims to protect. The children, caught in the middle, will one day inherit not only the financial consequences of these decisions, but also the narratives their parents weave around them. Imagine Archie, a boy who once bounced on his father's shoulders at polo matches, now reading years later about his parents' bitter courtroom battles. Imagine Lilibet, a girl named in honor of the late Queen, learning that her name was once whispered in depositions and arguments as proof of loyalty or betrayal. These are not distant hypotheticals. They are the very real futures being shaped in the shadow of this lawsuit. And yet, for all the drama, there are quiet moments that reveal the humanity still alive in both Harry and Meghan. Sources suggest that despite their conflict, both remain fiercely protective of the children in private. Harry, even in his anger, insists that Archie and Lilibet must never be denied their mother's presence. Meghan, even in her desperation, insists that Harry must remain part of their lives. These moments remind us that beyond the spectacle, there are still two parents who love their children deeply, even if they can no longer love each other. The public, however, rarely sees these nuances. In headlines, Archie and Lilibet are reduced to symbols. Harry fights for custody. Meghan pleads for children's stability. Children at center of divorce battle. Each headline chips away at their innocence, transforming them into figures of gossip before they are even old enough to understand. The tragedy of being born into fame is that privacy is never truly theirs, and now, the lawsuit threatens to take even that small chance away. For the royal family, the involvement of the children is both a concern and a weapon. King Charles, William, and know that Archie and Lilibet's future ties to the monarchy remain uncertain. They are both insiders and outsiders, born royal yet raised American, carrying titles yet disconnected from tradition. The lawsuit only amplifies these uncertainties. Will the children grow up embracing their royal heritage, or will they reject it as a source of pain? Will they one day blame Harry for pursuing the lawsuit, or Meghan for pleading against it? In the end, the children in the middle are the silent victims of a battle not of their making. Their futures hang in the balance of courtroom decisions, financial settlements, and media narratives. They did not ask to be part of history, yet history has claimed them. Every plea Meghan makes, every resolve Harry shows, echoes in their names. What makes this all the more tragic is the inevitability of memory. Children grow, they ask questions, they seek answers. One day, Archie and Lilibet will read the headlines, the interviews, the court documents. They will see the pleas, the resolve, the money, the betrayal. And in that moment, they will form their own judgments, not as children caught in the middle, but as adults piecing together the story of their parents' war. For now, they remain innocent, unaware of the storm raging around them. But as we look at Harry and Meghan, locked in a battle that consumes everything, we cannot help but ask, when the dust settles, what will matter more, the money, the reputation, or the children left in the middle? Every lawsuit carries with it a haunting shadow, discovery. The process where lawyers dig through private messages, financial records, emails, contracts, and hidden communications. In ordinary cases, this can be uncomfortable. In a case like Harry and Meghan's, it is devastating. Discovery does not just open bank accounts and calendars, it opens closets long kept shut. It brings to light whispers that were never meant for the public ear. And with Harry's $100 million lawsuit against Meghan, the threat of secrets being exposed is perhaps the most terrifying prospect of all. From the very beginning of this legal battle, insiders whispered about Meghan's deepest fear, that the lawsuit could pull into the open issues she has fought for years to bury. The rumors surrounding the couple, whispers of surrogacy, questionable financial decisions, secret deals with Hollywood insiders, have always simmered in the background. For Meghan, the courtroom threatens to turn whispers into evidence, suspicions into facts. Every plea she has made to Harry to drop the lawsuit has been, at its core, a plea to keep these secrets hidden. One of the most dangerous areas lies in financial dealings. After leaving the royal family, Meghan and Harry's financial independence depended on a web of contracts with corporations, streaming platforms, publishers, and event organizers. Many of these deals came with clauses, conditions, and expectations. Some succeeded, but many failed. Discovery means lawyers could request to see communications between Meghan, agents, and producers, emails where promises were exaggerated or where blame was cast. If such documents become public, they could confirm suspicions that Meghan overextended, that she misrepresented, or that she pursued opportunities not for the couple's benefit but for her own. Then there are the rumors about the children. For years, the media has speculated about Meghan's pregnancies, with conspiracy theories gaining traction about surrogacy and staged appearances. While much of this speculation is cruel and invasive, a lawsuit risks dragging even these personal matters into scrutiny. Medical records, witness testimonies, and timelines could be demanded. Even if disproven, the mere act of raising these questions in a courtroom could humiliate Meghan and haunt her children in the future. For Harry, who has always been defensive about protecting his children, this possibility is a double-edged sword. His lawsuit might expose truths he is not prepared for, yet his determination suggests he believes the risk is worth taking. Communications between Meghan and her estranged family members also hang in the balance. Her father, Thomas Markle, and half-siblings have often accused her of manipulation and secrecy. Discovery could mean revealing emails, texts, or calls that either validate or refute those claims. For Meghan, such exposure would reopen wounds she has tried to close, giving ammunition to critics who see her as untrustworthy. For Harry, it could be evidence of the betrayal he claims to have suffered, proof that his wife was not always honest with him about her past or her family dynamics. There is also the question of private recordings. Meghan has often been accused of keeping records, phone calls, voice notes, even footage for potential use in the future. If such material exists, Discovery could force it into the open. The irony of a woman who once accused the monarchy of secrecy being exposed for her own hidden archives would not be lost on the public. And yet, for Meghan, those recordings may be both a shield and a threat. A shield because they could support her narrative, a threat because they could expose contradictions in her story. Harry, too, faces risks. Secrets are never one-sided. Discovery could also pull his past into the spotlight, emails, texts, and decisions he would rather keep hidden. His military ties, his private conversations with family members, his anger-filled messages written in moments of frustration, all of these could surface. For Meghan, this is her quiet hope, that the lawsuit will backfire, that the exposure of Harry's flaws will weaken his resolve and restore her leverage. But Harry's decision to press forward suggests he is either prepared for this risk or too resolved to care. The possibility of secrets being exposed makes this lawsuit more than a financial battle. It makes it a high-stakes gamble with reputations, legacies, and futures. Imagine the spectacle of court documents revealing Meghan's private messages to Hollywood producers, contrasting sharply with her public claims of altruism. Imagine the revelation of disagreements between Harry and Meghan that show their marriage unraveling far earlier than they admitted. Imagine the monarchy, dragged back into the fray through leaked emails or texts where Harry vents about his father, his brother, or the institution itself. For the public, this is both thrilling and tragic. Thrilling because the allure of secrets being revealed is irresistible. Tragic because it shows how far the couple has fallen, from being global symbols of love and independence to being players in a legal drama that risks exposing their most intimate selves. The world watches with morbid fascination, knowing that whatever is revealed in court could redefine how history remembers them. Meghan's pleas, then, become clearer in this light. She is not just begging Harry to stop for the sake of the children or the money. She is begging him to stop for the sake of secrecy, for the preservation of a carefully crafted image. For Meghan, exposure is the ultimate loss, worse than money, worse than divorce. Harry, however, seems to see exposure as necessary. For him, sunlight is vindication. Secrets, in his view, are part of the betrayal. And so the lawsuit moves forward, shadowed by the threat of secrets waiting to be exposed. Every plea Meghan makes, every refusal Harry delivers, carries with it the knowledge that discovery looms ahead. The outcome is uncertain, but one thing is undeniable. When secrets are forced into the light, no one walks away unscathed. When Harry and Meghan first announced their departure from royal life, Hollywood greeted them with open arms. The industry thrives on spectacle, reinvention, and stories that captivate global audiences, and no couple embodied those qualities more than the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. They were the modern fairy tale, stepping out of the palace and into the glare of celebrity culture, ready to carve out a new identity as global icons. Studios, streaming platforms, publishers, and celebrities lined up to associate themselves with their story. The Sussexes seemed unstoppable, but Hollywood is fickle. Its loyalty is transactional, its admiration conditional. Over time, what began as excitement turned into hesitation, then distance, and finally disconnect. Today, as Harry pursues a $100 million divorce lawsuit against Meghan, the very industry that once embraced her is turning its back, leaving her isolated at the very moment she needs allies most. The disconnect did not happen overnight. At first, there were murmurs. Discontent among executives at Spotify when her podcast failed to live up to its initial promise. Producers at Netflix quietly voiced concerns that their projects lacked originality or mass appeal. Meetings with potential partners ended with polite nods, but no follow-up contracts. For an industry driven by metrics, views, downloads, cultural traction, Harry and Meghan's ventures simply did not deliver. And Hollywood, brutal in its assessments, began to see them not as guaranteed successes, but as risky investments. Meghan, who once walked red carpets and charmed studio executives, now faced doors that closed more often than they opened. The lawsuit only deepened this divide. No one in Hollywood wants to be associated with scandal that could taint their brand. Meghan's involvement in a bitter, public financial war with her husband made her less of an inspirational figure and more of a cautionary tale. The narrative shifted from the brave duchess who stood against the monarchy to the controversial celebrity fighting to hold on to her reputation. The disconnect extended beyond business. Celebrities who had once counted Meghan as a friend began to keep their distance. Oprah, whose interview with Harry and Meghan had reshaped the conversation about the royal family, remained silent. Serena Williams, once a vocal supporter, refrained from public comment. Tyler Perry, who had provided refuge during their escape from the monarchy, avoided inserting himself into the chaos. In Hollywood, silence often speaks louder than words, and Meghan's allies had chosen silence. For Meghan, this was a crushing blow. Reputation in Hollywood is not just about money, it is about belonging. To be excluded from the inner circles, to be avoided at industry events, to be whispered about rather than embraced, is to lose the very foundation of celebrity power. The lawsuit became not just a financial battle with Harry, but a symbol of her estrangement from the industry she had fought so hard to be accepted into. Harry, too, felt the disconnect, though in a different way. He was never fully part of Hollywood to begin with. His discomfort in interviews, his awkwardness at glitzy events, his preference for quiet, meaningful causes over showbiz glamour set him apart. Hollywood tolerated him because of Meghan and because of the story they represented together. But once the marriage fractured, Harry's relevance in Hollywood diminished almost entirely. Without Meghan by his side, he was less of a celebrity and more of an outsider who never quite fit in. This disconnect only hardened Harry's resolve and deepened Meghan's desperation. Harry looked at Hollywood and saw proof of his suspicions, that Meghan's ambitions had pulled them into a world that ultimately turned its back on them. Meghan looked at Hollywood and saw her last line of defense crumbling, leaving her exposed and vulnerable. Every rejection from a studio, every unreturned call from a former friend, echoed like a verdict in the court of public opinion. The irony is that both Harry and Meghan had once viewed Hollywood as their sanctuary. For Meghan, it was a return to her roots, a chance to prove she could thrive outside the monarchy. For Harry, it was supposed to be a refuge from royal duty, a place where he could build a new life free from the crown's constraints. Instead, Hollywood became a mirror reflecting their weaknesses. The projects that failed, the allies who withdrew, the skepticism that grew, all of it chipped away at the image they had tried to build. The lawsuit, then, was not just about money or betrayal. It was the final nail in the coffin of their Hollywood dream. No studio wants to sign a deal with someone whose name is linked to legal battles. No producer wants to attach themselves to a figure mired in scandal. No celebrity wants to risk being dragged into the chaos of a divorce played out in tabloids and courtrooms. Hollywood's disconnect is brutal, but it is also pragmatic. Meghan is no longer an asset. She is a liability. Yet, in Meghan's mind, the disconnect is not permanent. She believes, as she always has, that she can win people back, that her charm and resilience can repair bridges. Her appearances are carefully crafted to suggest strength, her speeches designed to remind the world of her causes. But even the best-crafted appearances cannot erase the whispers in Hollywood boardrooms. Is Meghan worth the risk? For Harry, the disconnect brings a grim sense of vindication. He has long felt uncomfortable in Hollywood, skeptical of its promises and exhausted by its demands. To see the industry distance itself from Meghan only reinforces his belief that she led them into a world that was never theirs. His lawsuit, in this light, is not just against Meghan but against the dream she sold him. The Hollywood disconnect is more than a subplot in their divorce. It is the backdrop against which the entire battle plays out. It strips Meghan of the allies she once relied on, isolates Harry further from the life he thought he wanted, and leaves their children caught between two parents disconnected not only from each other, but from the world they once thought would save them. As Hollywood turns its back, Harry and Meghan are left with fewer choices and fewer friends. Their war is no longer framed as the glamorous struggle of a royal couple against an outdated institution. It is framed as the messy collapse of two people who reached too far and found themselves abandoned when the lights dimmed. The disconnect is not just professional, it is personal. It is the sound of doors closing, of calls going unanswered, of invitations never arriving.